According to historians, the Thaumatrope is the first ancient optic toy to reveal the persistence of vision. It is often said that it was invented by English physician John Ayrton Paris, who gave a description of the device in his 1827 novel Philosophy and Sport Made Science in Earnest. However, there is an opposing story that comes from Charles Babbage, who in 1864 revealed that he thinks it was really William Henry Fitton who invented the device. The story goes that the astronomer John Herschel challenged Babbage to show both sides of a coin at once. Babbage held the coin in a mirror as a first attempt, and then Herschel demonstrated to Babbage that both sides were visible when the coin was spun on a table. William Henry Fitton was present for this exchange, and a few days later, he brought Babbage a piece of round paper, the image of a parrot on one side and a cage on the other, the paper suspended between two pieces of sewing silk, and as he spun it, the images magically combined. So it seems that Fitton was actually the first to create a thaumatrope, although Paris is often given credit for it. French artist Antoine Claudet also said that Paris was only able to get his idea for the thaumatrope in the first place because he had been present one time when Herschel was demonstrating his coin trick. This history is definitely an interesting one, and it's sort of a case of he said, she said, but it also speaks to media archaeology, since it really shows you that if you dig deeper into a history, it's more likely disjointed and chaotic rather than smooth and successive as historians often claim it to be. Regardless of who invented it, the first commercial sale of the device was recorded on April 2nd in 1825 when W. Phillips in London sold the product with the title The Thaumatrope, being rounds of amusement or how to please and surprise by turns. This long, fancy title was definitely a tactic to help with sales, as was the word thaumatrope itself. In Greek, it means wonder-turner, and this was a commonality among a lot of optic toys, having long and fancy names to them to make a simple invention seem more luxurious and appealing. It was sold in boxes of 12 or 18 discs, and it was initially sort of a luxury item since its cost was essentially equivalent to about what a week's pay would be for the average worker. So it was initially criticized for this, but the price cheapened over time, and today we can easily buy the product for a few dollars or simply make one at home. As with most optical toys, the thaumatrope was largely used for children's entertainment. A lot of early designs would also include political jokes and riddles on one side of the device, with the solution to the riddle on the other side. It was also quite popular because it was so easy to use and it was very portable. What I found most interesting, though, is that in Paris's book, he said that the book was, quote-unquote, being an attempt to illustrate the first principles of natural philosophy by the aid of popular toys and sports. So the thaumatrope was also a contributor to philosophical discussions about human perception in a way, which is very interesting because this took us beyond the typical use or the typical way of thinking about an optical toy as merely something for entertainment. And speaking of perception, how does the illusion produced by the thaumatrope work? As mentioned, it's apparently the first optical toy to reveal the persistence of vision. The term persistence of vision was coined by Joseph Plateau, who essentially said that if images in different shapes and positions are presented with short enough times between them, a viewer of those images will be able to see them as one. With a thaumatrope, there will be a disc with an image on either side. Then when the disc is spun, either via a wound-up string or an elastic or a metal or wooden rod of sorts, we can begin to see the illusion that the two images are one. This illusion can begin to be seen around 12 frames per second, and interestingly, as discussed in class, each image also has to be present long enough so that the first image persists long enough to combine with the second image and to not simply appear as a blur. So in order for an image to not appear as a blur or as a flickering succession of separate images, but rather as one smooth motion, there's sort of a sweet spot when it comes to the speed at which images are presented to the eye. And I'll touch on this later and how this speed turned out in my thaumatrope, but first I'll go over the process of creating it. So I was initially interested in making this toy specifically because of the claim that it was the first instrument to exploit the persistence of images on the retina. I first saw this video tutorial on YouTube, which does a decent job of explaining how the toy works and how to create it. So this is somewhat what I followed to create my thaumatrope, but then I saw this video and I was inspired to make an actual, more sturdy structure rather than just creating the thaumatrope on a piece of string. I began by illustrating 3 different designs to use with the toy, and the rest is pretty self-explanatory. I printed and cut out the designs. Then I traced 3 cardboard circles to act as the base for the images. I then proceeded to install a few kebab sticks into the cardboard to act as the string of the thaumatrope, and then I glued the 6 papers onto the appropriate side of each disc, making sure that each image on the back side of the disc was upside down so that when spun, the illusion could occur correctly. I did have a brief moment of worry when doing this because when I put the kebab sticks through a few pieces of the cardboard, it did sort of warp the cardboard, and this worried me that then the images themselves would be warped and that the illusion wouldn't occur correctly. But in the end, it didn't really make much of a difference to the final result. Moving on to creating the base of the thaumatrope, I couldn't find any specific tutorials online, so I sort of just winged it, and I decided to make a simple base out of wood and glue. My dad graciously helped me cut out some of the wood, and then I sandpapered it and glued it together to create something similar to what I had seen in the other YouTube video. It was definitely a struggle keeping everything together and upright as the glue dried, but 24 hours later the glue was cured and the thaumatrope was done. Here's what the 3 images look like when being spun. Overall, I think this project was a success. The illusion occurs with all 3 of the images, and that was the ultimate goal. However, I was a bit disappointed by the amount of effort and focus that I felt I had to have on some of the images in order for the illusion to occur. This feeling was slightly alleviated when I was watching the lecture by Peggy Fusel, who said that for some optical toys, the brain does have to work quite hard in order to see the illusion, and she also said that the higher the contrast, the easier the illusion is to see. And this made a lot of sense since my favorite image ended up being the moon and the star, which I drew, and this happened to be the image with the highest contrast as well. Briefly going back to the topic of the persistence of vision, I assume that the blurring or flickering of the images I saw at times was due to the fact that because the thaumatrope is so simple, it's a lot harder to control the frames per second rate. For example, it's not necessarily as complicated as something like the praxinoscope, which has mirrors at different angles in order to coordinate the flicker rate and the frame rate of the images. Nonetheless, I feel like the project was a success, and it's definitely an interesting optical toy. And what mostly fascinates me about it is that although we have come a very far way with cinema technology nowadays, optical toys like this one, or the zoetrope, praxinoscope, or whatever it may be, they all essentially function in the same way due to an understanding of the persistence of vision. And I think this is also something which can really speak more to the cyclical nature of history rather than it being a mere additive or successive process of events. Overall, this was a really fun and tactile project, and it also gave some interesting insights into how optical toys and media archaeology relate. And thank you for watching.